Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Lifeforce from 1985. So this movie is adapted from a book called Space Vampires, so that's going to probably tell you exactly what you're going to get into. I had fun with this movie. This movie is to be like this kind of sci-fi supernatural movie, and was to also have this kind of bow chicka wow wow kind of flavor, where we really just have this space girl who is to be without clothes through most of this film, and she's walking around and everybody's just kind of baffled and confused by this visual. And so, like, I like the beginning of this movie and I like the end, but then we have kind of like a middle part where we have Carlson, who is to be the astronaut within space that is to eventually make his way through an escape pod to make it back to Earth. And Carlson is to go on and have some mind connection within the space with the space girl, and now he has to go on and grab people and shake them and desperately like, where's the space girl? Where is she? And I'm like, you know what? They could have probably gone without a lot of that, because there's a long stretch of a window of time within this movie where that's all we really have is just Carlson grabbing people and shaking them like, where is this space girl? I want to know where she is. And I'm like, she's probably just going on and reading the script off kilter somewhere. She's probably in her trailer, waiting for her to eventually be declothed again, as if she's been through most of this movie with the bow chicka wow like flavor of this film. So, but yeah, I had fun with this movie, how they were trying to sci-fiingly like approach vampires in this film, and how we also had like these space people, because we have a space girl and we have two men that we also are to have them basically be walking walking Terminators that are getting like pelted with bullets, still without clothes on, but pelted with bullets. I'm like, you know what? If these characters were to have gone on and eventually been taken out of their like crystal tube things, shouldn't they have gone on and actually just like thrown a gown on these people? Throw a blanket on the motherfuckers. Like, come on. But no, I guess not. So, and we have to go on and do some like clever censorship in this film also at some points. Like, we can never really show the guy's junk through this movie, and I was like, you guys are thinking. So yeah, like, this movie was fun. I enjoyed it. It was a fun thromp of a film, even though we have some goofy stuff within this movie also. I had fun with it. So yeah, like, I would have to just go on and say that this movie is fun, because I can't really justify a grading for this film. I could probably go on and say it's definitely a positive review. This movie is available on Tubi, if I didn't say that already, TUBI. If you otherwise don't have Tubi, because evidently in some countries Tubi isn't available, you can probably go on and rent or buy this movie, because more than likely you could probably go on into an Amazon or something somewhere and probably buy this movie for fairly cheap. Or you can go on to any other review that I've done through recent time, and you'll probably find a number of apps that you can probably watch this for absolutely free. So, teeing it up, what is this movie about? So, we have a HMS Churchill spacecraft that is to be researching and analyzing and kind of studying a comet. So, not a comment, like, hey, if you want to drop any comments. No, a comet. So, C-O-M-E-T. Because normally I'm sure if I go on and consistently say comet, I will probably want to say comment instead. Wow, what a drastic number of letters that's added within this to confuse a person. Moving on. So, these space people, and this is the condensed version of this movie, these space people are to go on and make their way into some weird umbrella-looking alien spacecraft to go on and find a number of people that are without clothes in some crystals. And so we also have them go on and find these space bats, these massive space bats, and they end up grabbing one of the bats and bringing it within their ship to just kind of see whatever this is. So, and they have to go on and try to get all this and analyze it fairly quickly, because we have Carlson, who is to mention that if they don't do all of this now, they'll have to wait another 76 years for this comet to pass, and all of these astronauts will all be dead. So they go on and they get the crystal people, and they put them in the ship, and all of a sudden they find out, NASA does, or the NASA equivalent, because we have both the British people and the Americans both in this ship together. So we have it to where, like, the space station is to realize that this ship is just weirdly afloat. And so they have to go on and retrieve this ship and retrieve all the stuff that is inside the ship, which eventually leads to them having all of these alien specimens within this science lab that, of course, is to be called the European Space Research Centre. So we then slowly but surely eventually have one of these space girls, out of the three of these space people, who the other two are men. The space girl is to wake up, consume one of the guys, and then is to go on a rampage of which that no one else can stop her. And eventually that just leads to them trying to figure out or put pieces together along the way to try to track where this girl is so they can, like, kind of stop her wrath, realizing that when she is to suck the life out of somebody, that person is to eventually at some point to become a vampire like person. And so, and eventually we kind of play along with all of that stuff that is to go on within this film, which when we actually get into spoilers, I'll go more in depth about within this movie. I just kind of want to go on and kind of tee it up, and eventually we have a whole entire town that is to eventually just turn into one big massive monster movie, where it doesn't actually make sense anymore from, like, the early stages of this film, but, like, it just becomes that people are just monster or zombie looking and they're just eating people. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, weren't they supposed to, like, suck the life out of people, but now they're just eating people? Like, what's going on here? I'm so confused. But I guess it was just like, well, hey man, we couldn't CGI every single consuming part, or we couldn't go on and just have everybody just consistently kissing everybody to suck the life out of everybody. So, like, eventually it just kind of plays out into some kind of carnage. Of which, enjoy if eventually you can see this film for whatever reason. So let's tee it up. Let's go into spoilers. This was a fun film. I enjoyed it. So hopefully you can go out of your way to say that you can see this film with Space Girl, who is basically just this woman in all of her glory, walking around with her force power, choking people out. Because isn't that freaking sweet? You know what, if we could just have shown, like, a whole entire movie with this girl just walking around, just decking people, with either her power or her abilities or whatever, I would have been freaking sold. even with there not have been like any other story besides that, I would have just like, man, just see us just have this girl just be decking people consistently with her powers and whatever her abilities. Sweet, good enough for me. But anyways, with that said, let's go and double find this bad boy up, because it's about that time to, of course, just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time you do to spoil this movie. So, like I said in the very kind of tee up portion of this movie, we have the HMS Churchill spacecraft that is to be analyzing this comet. And so this comet is passing, and all of a sudden, tying to this comet is to be this alien spacecraft that looks very Umbrella-esque. They end up calling it an artificial image, and they are to say that they need to really go on and get as much as they can out of this comet research, because it's going to be 76 years before they can do something like this again. So, in a bunch of other like sciencey jargon, of which that I am not going to repeat, because why waste time? So we have it to where both Carlson and Roger are to make their way into this spacecraft after kind of floating their way to this ship. And so I can't help but think there's like at one point where they're honestly kind of going through like the butthole of the ship. But still. Anyways, so we have these astronauts going on, and they are seeing all these like space bats that, of course, they can only make the comparison to a bat. We don't really see these things much up close, but we have to like kind of assume that they kind of look bat similar, as well as one as Carlson is to break off a piece of this bat, and it seems to be dead. So, interestingly enough, at some point we end up seeing that I guess that this was at some point another like alien that I guess had gotten killed within space. So we then go on and have the astronauts going and finding these people within these crystal like coffins, it seems. They look very like crystal-esque, but still like it's also kind of like a coffin in a lot of ways. So they're in these tubes, let's just say. So we have it where the astronauts are to take all these tubes and to take a sample of this bat and to put it back into the spaceship. So we then go on and have this spaceship that is just kind of floating around. And so, since they were not to have gotten any kind of message from this ship, we have Columbia, another ship that is being sent after them to try and retrieve all of this stuff, and come to find out Columbia is to realize that a number of these crew members were to all have the life sucked out of them and to have been killed. So, like as if they'd all been burnt, because that's technically what happened with this ship. And it seems that not all the astronauts are accounted for, but I guess the crystal coffined space girls and two guys are to have been accounted for. So Columbia is to go on and retrieve these items and is to make their way back to Earth, where they are to dump all of this stuff off in the European Space Research Centre. So we have it to where there's like a number of guys that are all around this table, and so we have guys like Dr. Bukowski, and we have Dr. Hans Falada, as well as this minister, but it's not the prime minister. Eventually we see the prime minister later. It's just some guy called the minister, I guess, of this whole like research facility. And so we have a bunch of guys around this table, and they're all kind of contemplating whether these aliens are alive or not. And we have, of course, Dr. Bukowski, who is to go on and ask Dr. Falada if he can go on and say that these aliens are alive or not. And Dr. Falada is to go on and say, well, like, I think with this being an alien presence, like, I don't think there's any way for us to really legitimately have, like, an understanding of alien life or death. So these guys are just kind of stumped because they're like, well, this is uncharted waters here. We don't know what we're doing. And so it seems just kind of tempting to want to just dissect all these aliens, because that's technically what we do for every single movie. It's like, man, we just got to dissect these things. We just got to chop them up and just look at them and like, isn't this cool, right? Thumbs up. So we have it at one point that a guard is to be kind of looking over this space girl, and he is to have this kind of mask on, and he at some point is to somehow be driven by some wanting that he is not in control of, to go into the space girl's room. And we have Dr. Bukowski, who is looking on as this is happening, as he's kind of nodding off because it's been a long night and probably stressed and everything like that. So all of a sudden Dr. Bukowski is to go on and relook at the cameras to see that this security guard is with this space girl, and the space girl, as soon as this security guard is to touch this space girl, she is to wake up and is to get out of her bed and is to go on and start kissing up on this man. We have Dr. Bukowski, who is running like crazy to get through all of these doors. He has to get through like 30 to 40 different doors, opening them all up. He's like, I gotta get to the space girl. I gotta get running. And so we have Dr. Bukowski, who gets to Space Girl and the security guard. By the time that he gets there, this guy has had his life sucked out of him, as if this girl had drank him. And this guy is fallen over, and so now this girl is to just make her way through this facility, to then have a number of guys just be baffled and confused by what's all going on. And so we have it to where Dr. Bukowski is to have also seen this girl, and then she is to walk off, and there's nothing he could do. And so we then have Dr. Falada, as well as a number of the other guys that are to have like been in that table and whatever, to have gone and are trying to piece things together and figure these things out. As well as we also are soon going to have Colonel Kane here, who is to kind of be going on and taking out or trying to find people who are going to try to figure out a way to defeat these space aliens. So we go on and we have the space girl that is making her way down this flight of stairs, and she's going through all these security guards. And at one point, we have these two men that are just kind of baffled, but then they're like, okay, like, maybe we can go on and give her some kind of food, or maybe we'll go on and, like, figure out a way to, like, get this girl to just kind of retreat back to where she was. Well, we go on and we have the space girl who's to use her force-like power to choke one of the guards, and then it's to knock one of the other guards down, and then she continues to get to a point of a wall that has a bunch of windows on it, and she breaks all of them, and then just continues to walk on as if there isn't glass all over this place. So the guys are to find out that this girl is in this lobby, and so now they're running off to eventually just see the aftermath of all this. So Colonel Kane is to arrive, and so now they're trying to figure out and put pieces together of what's really going on here. So come to find out, they are to find Carlson's escape pod that he was to have gone on and taken because he was the last astronaut upon that spacecraft. And so they retrieve him, and now they have to go on and figure out what the heck happened. So Carlson is going on and telling them at first, like, when they were go on to retrieve all these items and bring them into the ship, we had like guys like Roger that was talking about that he's exhausted, and Carlson is to mention that he was invigorated. And so we start to slowly but surely start to see some dissension in the ranks of these astronauts. So at first we go on and see a guy named Rawlings, who's to be this kind of radio guy, and he ends up destroying all the radio connections and stuff. And we have Carlson who's now like upset with Rawlings, because it's like, well, hey, like, you were to be the only one that was to go on and do this, like, fess up. And Rawlings is saying, like, well, like, I don't remember anything, and so, like, I couldn't have done it because I don't remember. And so, like, like, okay, this is strange. So they go on and they just let it go. But here's the thing that eventually happens within the ship. So slowly but surely, Carlson is to realize that everyone within the ship is to start to get their life just sucked out of them. And Carlson is to be the only one left. And so Carlson, come to find out, was to have been the one guy who was to have originally let the space girl out of her crystal coffin, and he was the one to have led all the other astronauts to slowly but surely get killed off here. So because of the grief of that, because of the heartbreak of that, and also because Carlson wanted to get away from this woman, the space girl, he decided to go on and burn all the evidence and then go into this escape pod and just get the heck out of there. Which, like, we find bits and chunks about this within this movie, but I'm going to say all of it right now so we can cover all of this. So, because we have it to where Carlson is to eventually be brought to this research area where they're going to hypnotize him, and Carlson is to mention that he has some kind of connection with this space girl, and so Carlson is to somehow know exactly where she is. Come to find out, it seems that Carlson is to realize that the space girl is actually within this girl called Ellen, because we also start to see bodies piling up, and we have Colonel Kane that is to noticed that there had been the security guard who came technically back to life and consumed one of the doctors, and then the security guard ended up being caged into some spot where eventually, after 2 hours of not being able to feed on anybody or to suck the life force out of anybody, he ended up turning into dust. And then, like, the doctors realized, it's like, well, I guess this is going to happen again to that other doctor that we have the body of, and he's going to turn to dust. So they figured that out. And then we had it to where the space girl was to consume some girl in the woods somewhere, or some forest somewhere. And then she was to be brought back, bones and, like, basically, like, sucked her life out of as well. And eventually she was to eventually wake up and then turn to dust because she couldn't consume anyone's life force. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, so Carlson is to get hypnotized and realize that the space girl is to be somehow jumping bodies from people to the point of her being in some girl who is to be named Ellen. And so we have Carlson, who's hypnotized, and Ellen is to go into this vehicle with some guy, and Carlson is to rattle off the license plate for Colonel Kane to try to track this down. And so they track down the license plate, they find out where Ellen is within this kind of like a apartment complex. And so both these guys are to meet up with Ellen, and we have Carlson who's shaking the life out of her, wanting to go on and like, where is she? Where is she? We also had a moment where Ellen was to be trying to seduce this car driver, and I'm sure probably going on and also sucking the life out of him, because that's probably what every thing is to go on and just be done within these people, or what we just have to naturally assume. So Carlson is to go on and know when someone was to have, like, the space girl within inside of her. And so now he has to kind of follow the bouncing ball of where all these people are to eventually connect to. And eventually this leads Carlson to some mental hospital, which is to have them meet with Dr. Armstrong, where, of course, Carlson is to mention that there is some patient that has this birthmark and is to be bald and fat and whatever. And so they go to this room, and Carlson is to really just play a trick with Dr. Armstrong, because Carlson is to have immediately known that Dr. Armstrong was actually to be the vessel, not this guy. And so Carlson goes on and is to grab Dr. Armstrong and get these hypnotic drugs to put him on this table, and is to try to, like, again shake the life out of this guy, so that way Carlson can not only go on and try to talk to Dr. Armstrong, but then also talk to Space Girl. So this is kind of like the Dana Barrett Zool thing from Ghostbusters, where it's like there is no Dana, there's only Zool kind of thing. So, because possession, alien possession, but possession nonetheless. So a lot of this is to be like a supernatural movie that also has some sci-fi in it. So we get to where the space girl can talk through Dr. Armstrong, and so eventually this is just to lead to Carlson really just be so tempted to get to where the space girl is so he can be with her. And so eventually when the two of them both Colonel Kane and Carlson are to be going through the town to make their way to, of course, where Space Girl is. We also have Colonel Kane that is dealing with his own thing of Dr. Falada, who is to come to find out how to exactly kill one of the vampire men, the alien vampire men, because we had it to where both of the space boys were to go on and wake up, and we have these security guards that are just pelting bullets into them, and they do nothing. And so these guys start to walk off, and so we have it at one point where Dr. Falada is to then go on and figure out how to put a knife within a portion of this guy's body, which I guess is kind of almost the belly, it seemed. And so that ends up killing this vampire, or this alien vampire. And so Dr. Falada is calling Colonel Kane and telling him exactly how to wipe these things out, and that he had this specific weapon to be able to do so. And so Colonel Kane was to go on and meet with Dr. Falada, and it seems that Dr. Falada is to have also possibly been infected, and that he's also going to turn soon, as well as a number of people throughout this entire town were going through this rampage of tearing people apart because monster movie. So we have Colonel Kane that ends up shooting Dr. Falada in the head, and I guess that is one way to have taken this thing down, because, like, I'm sure Dr. Falada didn't have anybody to consume, and maybe he was hoping that Colonel Kane was going to be able to do that, like, help out, so to speak. So we also had a really cool scene between Colonel Kane and Carlson where they're on this helicopter, and we have these two, like, infected people that are trying to jump onto this helicopter, and all of a sudden, like, they're grabbing their own skin, and they're sliding off this helicopter, and they're falling to their death. I thought that was really cool, because, like, these characters are just kind of, like, really, like, disheveled and whatever. But so, all of this. So we have Carlson, who is to make his way to Space Girl, and is going to talk to her, kiss her, and just be connected to her in a way of which that would seem seductive in some ways. So while that's going on, while all that, like, the power of both of them together, because Carlson is to have some leftover stuff from the Space Girl, and the Space Girl is to want it back. So making Carlson really this gatekeeper to Space Girl's Keymaster. It's a lot of Ghostbusters references here, but, like, you know what I mean. Like, he has something from her, and so, like, yeah. So Colonel Kane is to make his way, while both Kane and Carlson are driving around with these vehicles through town, making their way to Space Girl, and Colonel Kane is to have to deal with one of the space boys, and so, as well as him just going on and having this, like, onslaught of just a bunch of monsters that are all in one certain area that he's kind of fighting off here and running from. We have one of the space boys that is to tell Colonel Kane, it's like, well, hey, if you want to just kind of give up now and just kind of, like, just come with me, because it seems like in kind of like Ghostbusters, how when we have the, like, containment unit breach, where all of a sudden we have all these kind of, like, flares of the, like, these spirits kind of going on. We have the exact same thing going on within this movie, where we have a bunch of, like, human souls that are all kind of floating into one direction, which is to either go into Space Boy or Space Girl, or is to possibly set up that these souls are all going to be, like, ushered into this alien umbrella looking ship. So again, we have Colonel Kane who is going up against this space boy. And so, as this space boy is getting infused with all of this human souls, we have Colonel Kane that is to take this sword and jab it into this guy's stomach. And so, this guy is having this weird, bizarre, like, after effect, and he ends up getting killed. So, we then go on and have Colonel Kane, who is seeing Carlson and Space Girl just kissing it out and loving it out. And so we have a moment where Kane is consistently calling for Carlson, and then Carlson is eventually, after kind of knowing what's going on, Carlson is calling for Kane. And so Kane tosses Carlson the sword, this little sword thing, and so Carlson is to stab into the Space Girl, which eventually is to take both Carlson and both the Space Girl in to the spaceship, where then everything is to get destroyed after that. And we then have to assume that basically this is the equivalent of killing a vampire queen. So then I'm assuming after that, we go on and, like, all of this is to possibly be resolved, or we probably just have some aftermath of trying to still kill off these aliens. But I think I would assume after this that, like, killing the queen kills everything else off. So we had Colonel Kane that is watching the aftermath of all this, and then eventually the movie just kind of ends in that way. So with that said, I think I'm going to go on and get out of here. Hopefully I covered most of this movie. There was probably stuff that I tried to rush through or had to come back with. Reasonably, just because of, like, me, like, wanting to not be far too specific about this film, and who knows exactly how this review will go. So let me know in the comments below if there's something that I probably forgot about, some big fat thing that could have been vitally important to the story that I immediately forgot about. Maybe there was just a name somewhere that I forgot about, or maybe there was some kind of detail and whatever. Let me know in the comments below, because that's always great. Because at the end of the day, it helps out. So without a doubt, I'm just going to get the heck out of here. Thank you for watching this. I really do appreciate it. Trying to go on and just watch some movies that I can have fun watching, and this just so happened to weirdly be one of those. So with that said, bow and chicka wow wow, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.